What's up, y'all? This is my first episode back in a while, and just to reintroduce myself, my name is Alexander Hermstad, and this is the Way of Keys podcast, and it's good to be back. I last recorded sometime in 2021, and just kind of lost momentum, and other things in my life took precedent, and I've been thinking about wanting to get back for a while, and so here I am. And in this quintessential episode, is that the right word? Quintessential episode, I interview a buddy of mine named Luke, who I met on Twitter years ago. And as we talk about in the podcast, he was one of the first friends I had on Twitter, or friends, acquaintances, friends. Yeah, we're friends. And he was also one of the first, or he was the very first person to book a piano lesson with me. So he's really a legacy figure in my online re-emergence into the online world. So we had a good talk. It was fun. I had a good time. And that's a good sign, I gotta say, compared to just a lot of the nervousness, a lot of the weirdness of podcasting in the past has dissolved. And I was happy to just enjoy the conversation. We got into a variety of topics, talked about Twitter, some interesting things about the spiritual path, and teaching, and kind of some of the scary things about teaching. We had a nice little thing on siddhis and powers, and I kind of fell on my face trying to explain Rahu, but we got into that a little bit, and just kind of it was a good talk. And so I won't take too long in this intro here, but I hope you enjoy the episode, and there's more to come, and it's good to be back. I hope you enjoy. I just wanted to start out just by saying, appreciate you coming on the podcast, and just I guess the reason that I kind of reached out to you, and that I kind of wanted you to be on here is kind of when I was first getting on Twitter, right? And I was kind of talking about this, kind of market my piano lessons. I was trying to get out there. You were the very first person to actually reach out and book a lesson with me. So,
oh wow,
that gave me some, that I appreciated, and I didn't, and that was actually the first piano lesson that I had taught up to that point, that I had actually given. So I tried not to make that clear to you, obviously. So, but maybe
right.
It was, but we didn't get that far really in that process.
No, we didn't. I'm not a concert pianist yet. No, I think you and I did 2, maybe 3 sessions together. And right after that, I moved out of that house, and I haven't had a piano to play since. So that was kind of the end of it for me. How has it gone for you? Have you continued to take on students and things?
Yeah, I for about a year, a little over a year, I had a 2 younger kids that I taught for some time. But yeah, I've kind of taken a step back from that a bit. I've been getting more into yoga and the art of teaching yoga, and it's easier. It's it's harder to find. It's yoga is such a universal thing, which I feel like music should be as well. I feel like music should be. I feel like people are more inclined to get into yoga for the exercise benefits and this and that, and even though it's it's a part of an ancient, metaphysical tradition through the Vedas and all that. But, people are more inclined to get into it. Whereas music, it's you mention it to people and they're there's this people think it's part of this hidden club, that they're not, it's oh, I'm a musician or I'm not a musician, and I shouldn't even bother because it's so.
Right. The whole imposter syndrome and the fear of failure and not sounding good and all that, right?
Yeah, and or just this idea of I'm not that, that's something out,
Right.
and I feel like it really it originates from like school, like the way it's taught in schools, and how it is kind of like so.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is competitive. It's like you're in it. It's like they're trying to get you into the conservatory or the university,
Right.
and it's more of a performative.
Do you know the phrase, comparison is the thief of joy?
I've heard that once or twice. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, right, like that's the whole education system is like, okay, we're going to take everybody and we're going to rank them and we're going to have scored numbers and everyone's going to be compared to everyone in every different way. And you like lose the capacity to just enjoy a thing for its own being. Like,
Yeah.
like if you're making art, like your art does not have to be good for you to enjoy it. But if you only know art as good art and then you see your art, then you feel, like crestfallen and you lose your joy.
Right. Yeah. It's like, yeah, the comparison thing. And it's like it's adding competition where it's like, it doesn't actually help. Cause like competitions, it is good, for certain things. Like, hey, maybe for the more ruthless subjects in school, like math or something like that, maybe you're competing with your
Yeah.
buddies, like you're trying to get better at this thing, but with something that's more subjective, like art, right? It's like, you know,
Right.
it doesn't, we all have our own processes for this kind of thing. And it's like, it's all going to be very personal to everyone. And so it's like you're saying,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, that comparison thing is it's not doing you any favors. And
It can be a big demotivator, right?
yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And it's like I have to remind myself of that too, like comparing myself, because I started piano when I was like 18, right? So I kind of getting
Yeah.
into it a little later than usual, which is weird to say, oh, 18 is late to start anything. It's like a weird thing to say, right? It's like, and music is one of those things that like it's like if you didn't start when you were 4 or 5, then it's like, what's the point? And there is truth to that, right? Because you have
Depending on
that
the level that you want to play at, right?
right. Like,
Yeah.
is your goal actually to become like a concert pianist, or is it to kind of explore your own emotional desires through the medium of music, right? It's like those are very
Right.
different goals, right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, but anyway,
Well, a few things came to mind for me. So, to talk, you mentioned like the value of competition. And so I'm very into words and their meanings and words and their origins, right? And so what does compete mean? Like when you break it down to Latin, so com is with, pete is like ped, which is foot, which is for racing, so like running. So competing in like that sense is like the person, like if you're in a relay race or if you're running a marathon, right? Like, yes, you may be competing as far as like who gets to the finish line first, but also you're like doing this thing together. Like you're both, you're all like, you're in it. Right. And so actually competing is part of it is like, yeah, like we are like doing this together. And like there's a unity even in the distinction.
yeah, it's that like camaraderie, right? Like competition.
Yeah.
Which do you know the etymology for that one? Is that in your etymology bank there?
For camaraderie,
Yeah.
I don't, well, so, no, I'm not sure. I think the rod would probably be rad, which is root. But no, I'm not that good at Latin. I do know somebody on Twitter or on X, which, she's very good at Latin. She would probably be able to tell us. I think she speaks Latin in her sleep. So you started out mentioning, the former bird site. Did you want to talk about any of that world as well?
Sure. I mean, like I'm gonna keep on calling it Twitter until on my browser it says like x.com. It still says twitter.com. So I don't really.
Oh,
It has
really? Oh,
is that like am I behind? Am I like am I
well,
updated?
I mean, on I just use the app, and on the app, it says that my tweets are being posted at x.com. So as far as I'm aware, it is just x.com. But I don't know.
X.com redirects to twitter.com. So I mean, like until that,
Oh, okay. I didn't know that they hadn't I didn't know that they hadn't done the domain shift, because from my perspective, coming through the smartphone, all I see is X anymore.
Same. So if like for someone that only uses the app, like yeah, I see
Yeah.
how you guys have adjusted, but like I probably use Twitter almost more on my desktop, and it says
Oh,
twitter.com. And
okay.
it's like I'm just saying Twitter, like I can't. It's just
Yeah.
what it is.
Fair enough. I respect. I mean, if you're seeing it, it makes sense to be saying it. For me, I'm very much, the whole 1984 thing of like, one day we're at war with these guys, the next day we're at war with the. I'm fucking playing the game. If we're changing the name, then let's say the new name. It's fine.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm not. I have no per. I've had my. I joined Twitter and created my account in 2008, but I'm in no way loyal to that name or those people or whatever. It's like this car, right? Like, I'm driving a Subaru, and in the 40s, the company that makes this car was making jet planes so that they could terrorize people and kill Americans. But I don't hold that against them, whatever. It's a fucking Subaru.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think, yeah, I mean, I will say one thing. I mean, like I'm the same as you. Like I whatever. Like I'm down to call it X.com as soon as it like comes naturally to me. But like as far as like I just instinctually still, it's just. But
Right. Well, but I've been consciously, and that goes back to the whole thought. I've been consciously choosing to like use the word post instead of tweet and say X instead of Twitter, because the only way it's going to change is if I make the incremental steps of changing the pattern.
so yeah, that's interesting. Like I I wondered that about like for me, and it's like I'm just hoping that eventually my brain will just see the X and the post enough, and then it'll just like eventually happen. But maybe that's an
Right.
assumption that I shouldn't be so easy to make. I don't know, but I will say aesthetically, Twitter looked a lot cooler than the X. I like the bias and you rather than the weird X thing, but that's whatever. I don't. Yeah, it wasn't that Twitter wasn't that aesthetic. It wasn't that good, but
I mean, I get the aesthetic difference for sure, but I really do genuinely believe that he has a vision for what he purchased and what it's going to become. And by the time that it becomes what he has envisioned for it, it won't be Twitter. Like, it will not be the same thing at all, because he bought 1 billion accounts that are all in the same database. That's what he bought. Everything else he can change, and he's probably going to change a lot of it.
yeah, yeah, right. And that's where I think right now I'll start on X. Is it just X? Do we say X
Yeah.
app or just X on
I just
X?
say X.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, on X right now, like I mean, in the circles of Twitter that I'm looking at, there's a lot of Elon Musk is evil, right? And like this is like this part of this bigger agenda of like control and like the everything app, and now blah blah blah. You got to get this subscribe on it, and then you're in the thing, and like that, like on some level, that's all true. Whatever. It's like there is more control and all that, but that's it. I feel like that's such a inevitable kind of shift that we're all kind of moving into, and it's like it something about just calling it evil and complaining about it just seems like unproductive, I guess, to me. Like and
Yeah.
because it's like this is happening. It's gonna happen, and yeah. I think there's an element of like, it's going to kill, like Twitter used to have a certain vibe or whatever. There used to be like a lot of people are going to kind of leave, right? There's going to be this kind of exodus of like a lot of groups, and it's like, and we're going to be on there and like, oh, remember when these accounts were there? And, it's, so there is kind of some of the life I think is going to get sucked out of it a little bit, but I'm okay with that personally.
Yeah. I mean, I ask this question sometimes. Have you read Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom?
I haven't.
Okay. So, do you know Cory Doctorow, the guy Boing Boing, the writer?
No.
Okay. So, are you familiar with Boing Boing at all?
No.
Okay. So this is internet lore circa like 2002. I'm pretty sure, right? So Cory Doctorow writes Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, and it's about a guy who hangs out down in Orlando and he lives off of his social credit, right? So he's got, like 12,000 upvotes or whatever as far as like his status amongst people, right? So in terms of X, he would be, somebody that's got an account that's got like 15,000, 25,000, followers. And as long as everyone holds that view of him, he is afforded access and privileges and all sorts of things in the material world dependent on his social status in this online service. And I think it's basically like a digital currency. So imagine like Bitcoin tied to your social rep. That means that you get a dividend every month and you can use that to pay for whatever you need up to, however far your dividend goes. And then he winds up joining like an ad hoc anarchist collective that manages the Haunted Castle ride in Disney World. And then there are other like organizations that have other rides. And then Disney World itself is part of this other org. And so it's like DAOs all over the place everywhere. And everybody's like afforded based on their like social status. And so for me, like, I'm not saying that's what Elon is pushing towards, but between like what the Chinese are doing as far as social ranking and all of that, and where this could go with the fact that, yeah, he's like, okay, if you post, you're creating. So if you want to be a creator, we'll count all of your views for you and we will pay you accordingly. Like, so really it is turning into a place where you could be somebody like Goth 6000 or Deep Fates or whoever, and you could just not have to work and just be your Twitter person all day long. Is that bad? It's weird, but nobody promised us a future that made any fucking sense. Right? Like, is Elon evil? Yeah, maybe. Maybe he's the literal Antichrist. I mean, because what's Christ call us to do? He calls us to turn inwards and to lose our possessions and to not care about where the coin is coming from. And Elon is doing the exact opposite of that. And he's also building fucking rockets. Like, humans don't need rockets to go to outer space. If you can find your still point, right? Like, you're studying yoga. Like, if you can get there, you can go there. Like, reality is a game, and we're picking the most mechanistic form by way of our technology, right? Because like all of our gadgets are fun, but they're rudimentary compared to what I genuinely believe like the mind and the conscious being is capable of, given adequate training in the right environment.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. It's like, yeah, there's something. Are you familiar with like the kind of age of Aquarius kind of rhetoric? That kind of paradigm.
Yeah. I mean, we've got until next November, right?
I don't know. Is that like a real thing? Is that like a date?
Okay. So I don't know how much I know you're into astrology. I'm not super into it, but I do have a friend who she's really into this. I think it's called like evolutionary astrology or something. So it's all very Pluto focused, right? Mm-hmm. Like you look at like the bigger understanding of what's happening on Earth through the lens of Pluto. And so according to what she said, we have been transiting into and retrograding out of Pluto a couple of times now. And come November of next year, we're gonna come out of a retrograde cycle. We're gonna go into Pluto, and we're gonna stay in Pluto for the next 20 years. Or Pluto is gonna stay in Aquarius, right? Pluto is gonna stay in Aquarius for the next 20 years. And she was pointing to like when OpenAI released ChatGPT, like that was a moment where we were entering into like where Pluto was transiting into Aquarius right when that happened. And then we've cycled back out. But so come November of next year, apparently, like we're going to be Aquarian in a way that we haven't locked in before. And it's going to be a big period of time.
Yeah. Well, definitely it's like objectively we seem to be heading in that direction. Like I'm
Yeah.
weird with dates, especially I'm a sidereal astrologer myself. So tropical, it's kind
Right.
of I know it means something. It all means things. And it's a real reflection of and you can divinate through it and all that and all the respect to the
Yeah.
tropical astrologers out there. But there's an astronomical reality of like where the stars are in the sky. And and so when we say things like this planet is moving into this sign and we're speaking in tropical, it's like, well, it's literally not like as far as like, you're it's because it's 24, because it's like, we're not going to take that tangent right now of the tropical sidereal thing.
I'm not defending like the views and opinions and beliefs expressed by me are not to be taken seriously. I am not a professional haver of wisdom. I am an amateur sinner. I don't know shit about Jack. I'm
Yeah,
just some guy.
yeah, that's a good,
Uh,
good disclaimer.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't earnest post. I get stoned and I do like psychedelic tweet storms because that shit cracks me up.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw the one that I did yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's what I said. Cause I was like through your Twitter, I'm like, okay, what are we going to talk about? Like scrolling through and like, I'm like, okay, like, he likes to have fun, he likes to, which I appreciate. Yeah. There's like it's a very kind of like a childlike, energy, playfulness and all that. I think that's very, that's a good, that's good to get out there into the world.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's this thing, X or Twitter or whatever you call it.
Did I say
It's fun because no, you didn't. I'm just saying both for the sake of for the audience. So that everybody feels like they're being seen. Um, yeah, it's just a hella fun place to just scribble stuff where anybody can see it and do whatever they want with it. Be that liking it or hating it or commenting or muting or what. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for me, I feel like it's very much a creative outlet. Like I felt like last night when I did that. So, and for anybody who didn't read this and we're just talking about it out of context, I posted a photo of a poster on my wall that looks like wood paneling, but it's a poster on top of the wall, which is wood paneling. And then I posted that with the word meta over it because it's a very meta image. And then I continually like quote tweeted myself to the point where anybody who would just randomly find one of those tweets would be like, what the hell is going on? This guy's freaking out because I was like 7 or 8 quote tweets deep.
Yeah.
Because when I did it in that moment, I'm like, this to me is like performance art. Like this is me creating a thing that somebody can just find, stumble into, and just go, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah. It's like one of those, it's like an Inception kind of, it's like the mirrors and the
Right. Well, and it's like a zine. It's like a zine from like the late 90s, early 2000s, where you just pick up this magazine that you don't know what's inside of it. And it could just be madness, right? You could just be reading like the manifesto of some guy who spends 30 hours a week playing Warhammer 40K. You don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah. 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 No, I really appreciate there's a certain, I really appreciate that in like films, especially just like there's just a certain like just this is pure chaos and madness, and there's almost no like thread of like there's kind of it's like I feel like it's kind of an avant-garde kind of tweeting that you're exploring there. It's kind of like not really. I'm not going to say it's like because like people talk about shit posting, and that's like a little different than what you're doing. That's like that's more. I don't know. That's something
I
else.
mean, I do plenty of that. And I also
You do
do a
that
lot
too.
of like
Yeah.
bitching and things about my personal life. I really do everything on there. It's just, and it's funny because in my real life, I use post-it notes a lot. Like I have a wall in my room that just is covered in post-it notes because that's how I keep things organized. And for me, this site, X is also, it's just a place where I can just put a post-it note of whatever I'm thinking in that moment so that if somebody wants to know how I feel, they know how I'm feeling. Or if I want to say something that I think is funny, I'm saying something that's funny. Or if I want to, reply to somebody with like a very cryptic response that makes perfect sense to me and probably doesn't mean anything to them, that's what I do because that's what I want to do.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
and that's what I love about it is that you really can just go and do what you want to do there. If you want to be earnest and try to impress people and get their attention, you can do that. If you want to just be a madman, you can do that too. And if people are into it, they can stick around for it. And if they're not, they can ignore it.
Yeah, it's cool. And that's something that I really I respect in your which it's like I'm not quite there yet in kind of the level of like I feel like kind of vulnerability and like authenticity that are like kind of just that like unashamed of like just going out there and doing that kind of stuff. And so yeah,
Right.
it's so it's
Well,
inspiring
okay.
to
So
see.
here's part of what happened for me at some point, like cognitively. I came across this guy. I came across like a blog post about this guy. I don't remember the guy's name. I think he lives in like New York City somewhere. There's this guy, right, who like the FBI got interested in him because he's a hacker or something like that, right? And so he realized that because he was being surveilled, the answer to the question of how do I deal with being surveilled is he realized he just had to make way more data. So like he set all of his devices so that they're constantly taking photos and constantly taking videos and constantly creating log files and doing so he basically just created such an incredible flood of like, all right, if you want to watch me, try to find the signal for all of the noise that I'm going to create. Right. And so for me, like I can post a sincere, earnest, thoughtful post that might offend somebody or I might say something, but good luck finding it because I tweet all of the time. And so if I said something 3 days ago, like you've got to really want to know that I said it because I've tweeted a ton of other shit since then.
Right. Right. And there's just already, and then that's, you're just one account. And then there's just so much information out there in
Correct.
the first place that it's like, who am I to think of like anyone who's even paying that close attention to like my tweet that I'm insecure about? It's like, and so it's like, yeah, that's totally always like the perspective that you got to have. It's like,
Yeah. Well, and I think too that like I think there is a fair number of people who they honestly care about the fact that their follower count is growing and that it makes them feel like they're like there's more influence and there's more responsibility to like say things that are considered and all of that sort of thing and that can create reservation. Um, but again, my style is different. I got to the point where I had 600 followers and I immediately started like soft blocking people to like get my numbers down to like check and make sure that everybody that I was followed by seemed like an actual human being and wasn't a bot. And then anytime I get followed by a bot, I immediately like block those. And then I go out of my way sometimes to just like I get a vibe of like, oh, I think I said something that somebody wouldn't like. And then I'm like, all right, time to fucking like double down, triple down, quadruple down. Like, this is me. And if you don't like it, unfollow my ass. If I get to 580, I know it's time to start being incendiary because I don't want numbers. I don't want influence. I don't want anybody to think that I'm anything other than an amateur sinner.
wow, that's incredible. Dude, I feel like just because that's what you don't want, I feel like the reverse of it's going to happen. You're going to accidentally get this like,
No, 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 no. See, that's the thing is like I've met people like and honestly, like I can say that I do feel like I am a person who who makes an impact in the world with people. And I've had people say before, like, oh, wow, like you should get a great following. Like you could teach a lot of people a lot of things. But like, no, I go out of my way to like disqualify myself or avoid or hide from like that whole thing because like, man, like teaching is sus. Jesus, Jesus in the gospel says, like, don't call anybody your father, don't call anybody your master, because like they're not qualified. You got to figure that shit out for yourself. You know? Like I came out of like a really deep retreat and I have this like oracle of like it's called the Philokalia. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it the right way, but Philokalia, Kalia, whatever, right? And it's like there's like 5 volumes, and you're not really meant to read it from front to back. You're meant in a way to kind of just open it at random, just whatever you feel inspired to like open it to, and then just take that in. And so I got done with this retreat, and then I read this thing, and it's like, you know, it's from a monk from like Russia or somewhere from like the year, you know, 1200, who's like, okay, here's what you need to know about being a teacher. And it's like a long essay, but basically you break it down. It's like, okay, yeah, like lots of people have lots of followers. And if you want to be a good teacher, here's a lot of biblical references and stuff. But ultimately, like, check yourself because you're slipping up all the time. If you think you can teach anybody, try teaching them by example.
Yeah.
Good luck. Right? Because like that's the gravity of like what it is to like go deep and to go deep with other people. Like I've got friends on the site who are like taking up the reins of teaching people, and I'm like, dude, guy, my bro, like if you sit with somebody, you don't know where they're going. And unless you know that you've been where they might go, don't take the responsibility of being their guide. Because what if they fall into a fucking pit that you don't know how to climb out of? Do you want do you want to be on the other end of their rope? I don't. I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
So I am not a professional of wisdom.
Yeah. No, I get that. It's a huge, it's a huge thing right now, especially just in the landscape of like the whole guru landscape of like, just, it's like this big power game of like convincing people that you're better than them. And then they are going to submit to you. And then you have this power exchange, but it's like, it's high.
I think that's a lot less. I think there are those people for whom the power is to trip, but I also think that there are a lot of people where like, you know, just the rent is too damn high. And it's like, okay, I'm going to learn enough of a thing so that I can teach the thing, even though I'm not really a master. Like I might be a journeyman of the thing. I'm not really a master of the thing. It would be much better if you had a better teacher, but I need you to pay me because I got bills to pay, you know? So there's a lot of that as well, where it's like, well, I've done enough of this that like most people who don't know Jack would think that I know a lot. Okay, good luck.
Yeah.
Be careful. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it comes to that, just a question of like, well, what can you like honestly, what is honestly your wisdom to share? Like not, yeah, like the information that you have and like the, you know, the knowledge and this kind of thing, but like, where have you actually walked? And then it's like, and I feel like you can, I mean, if it's like within your domain to be able to do that, you know, and generally that kind of thing. But then I think it's also true, like you don't like teachers these days. And I feel like this goes back to the whole Aquarius thing too. Just like like for a teacher this day, I feel like you got to be just telling the person basically to go inward. Like that's all you're just like like, you know, maybe you have some attainment that they don't have, right? Or maybe have some skill, but it's not about you giving them your thing. It's about you helping guide them to make their own decisions and find their own realizations. Like, you don't want to take the learning away from people. And I think that's a big danger, is just like, you think as a teacher, your job is to just like tell, like give people the lessons, when it's like, really, you want them to learn, that you want to like guide them into finding those lessons themselves.
So let me share with you the imagery that came into my mind as you were speaking, that I think speaks to the point. So that essay that I was telling you about teaching, it points directly to the lesson that is being taught. And the lesson that is actually being taught, the secret inner teaching, is relax. The secret inner teaching is actually learning for yourself, in your mind and in your body, what it is to relax, to actually let go and to not grab back on. Now, if you go to the suttas, if you go to the Buddha, and what the Buddha was talking about, he was talking about fetters, right? He's talking about tied knots. He says that the first stage of enlightenment is loosening these fetters. The second stage is loosening these fetters, right? Like, it is literally a matter of untangling things. And so it's not my job to stick my fingers into your wires and untangle them for you. No, it's your job to learn how to loosen those wires and untangle them. I can show you how I do it, but really, in order to do it, what you need to do is you need to relax. I can try to provide an environment where I'm as relaxed as I can be, and that might help you bring your tone down, and that might help you relax. And what can happen is, when you relax, right, like strings can come off, and sparks can shoot out of the chords as they're flying around, and magic can happen, but you shouldn't take that too seriously. What you should do is you should relax. So the attainments, what is it that's being attained? What's being attained is a knot that's not there anymore. What's being attained is an absence, not a presence. You don't get something, you lose something that you didn't need. Now, maybe you needed it at some point because your causes and effects required it, but to keep going where you're going now, and you don't need that anymore, all you need to do is relax.
Yeah, because it's about like turning to source, right? It's like that. I think, I've just been recently getting into some of the like the Chinese arts, like a neigong and qigong and stuff, and like the concept of wuji. I think it's like, and it's just like the, it's the yin yang symbol, but it's just it's like the waters have completely calmed down, and it's just a circle that's just blank, right? And it's and that's like, yeah, and then that's where your inner power is, right? That's where your inner light, your inner like thing is going to be. And yeah, like the best an external guru can really do is lead you back to that. That's like the best thing that really, is the outcome, and have that. And that's teaching the person. And so then they become self-sufficient, right? And so it's like they don't need the guru, they don't need the methods, right? Because there's been this connection with, like you're saying, relax, like return to center.
Where my mind is going now, it's tricky, right? Everything's tricky. Again, going back to like, why teach somebody? Because why do you want to be responsible for their weirdness? The thing about relaxing is that some people shouldn't do it. Like, and I don't mean that in like the very most general sense of like, yeah, no, sure, sit down in your chair and like, yeah, just like unclench your forehead, unclench your jaw. Yeah, absolutely, relax. But when it comes to like, okay, like somebody who's like, I want to like take on the work and like seriously like dig deep, you got to check your priors, and you got to check your conditions, right? Like, it's if you've got a family to feed, right? Like, you don't want to go, like separating your ego from your consciousness or whatever, because your family needs your ego to keep the bills paid or whatever, just like if you have responsibilities, if you have roles, if you're not looking to upturn the apple cart, like please, just like push your apple cart carefully. Like God bless apple carts. We need them. But yeah, but there's also, and I'm as guilty of this as everyone else that I might point my finger at. Um, I feel like there is a big culture here in the world that we live in now of like shopping out the experience of monasticism or of like going on retreats or doing ceremonies or whatever, but then like coming back to the apple cart like half baked or third baked or whatever and thinking that you learned something, but you didn't actually like, don't eat that pie. It's not ready.
Mm.
You know?
Mhm.
Like if you want good pie, find the pie that's been cooked all the way. Right? Like that's the pie you want to eat. That's the pie you want to learn how to make. And I think there's a fair amount of like half baked pie getting passed around in Seoul because
That's been good.
yeah, I was not expecting to go into a whole like apple cart, apple pie metaphor thing. This just kept happened.
And that works. Yeah. Yeah. Don't eat the
Yeah.
half baked pie, you know?
Yeah, don't eat the half baked.
Mm. Huh.
But then like how do you find a fully baked pie? I don't know. Go bake your own. Or find a really good recipe book that you believe has a really valid recipe and follow the recipe. And part of the recipe says like don't take the pie out halfway through. I mean, I guess it doesn't explicitly say don't take the pie out halfway through. But in the suttas, there are times when the Buddha does say like you need to get through the process before you do anything else. Like don't do this halfway.
Yeah.
I can't point you to like which discourse, but I know it's in there. I know I've read it, you know?
I mean, yeah, because it can be like talking like for the ceremony example, for example, like so say someone does ayahuasca, kind of like your eye gets halfway there and then comes back into their life, and then people kill themselves. Like it's like
Right.
it gets to that point
Right.
where it's the the pie has gotten rotten from like sitting out and the maggots have.
Well, okay, so here's the thing about ayahuasca. Maybe you've heard this story. I think it's an anecdote that just circles around the internet. But so there's this story of where somebody's, in their ceremony, in their vision, and the snakes are there, and the snakes are like, we're the creators of this planet. We're the creators of your reality. And the person comes out of it, and then they're like talking to the ayahuasquero and tells them that, like, oh yeah, the snake said this to me. And the guy's like, yeah, the snakes always say that shit. Don't listen to the fucking snakes. Like, that's just, they're on it. That's their trip. But if you didn't have that ayahuasquero, or if you didn't ask him that question, you could leave that place thinking that the snakes are in control.
Mhm.
Like, you could totally be fed bad data, let it reset your priors, and then guide you into a world of destruction. Like,
Right.
right, right?
Right. Which, and then perhaps, if you survive that destruction, and there's lessons to be learned. So there's like from some angle, there's always a silver lining.
No, I mean, right? Like that's the thing about the cosmic joke is it all plays. Like, yes, you can go on like one trip, like take on some bad faith assumptions and then ruin your life, and that's okay. Like it'll come around eventually. But also, like there is a value in like recognizing uh, skillfulness and unskillfulness and how to develop those things and how not to get tricked,
Yeah. Yeah. Like in the Yoga Sutras, it's like there's on the chapter in cities, right, which is the powers, which is like whatever. It's like people gets drawn into these energy traditions to like, oh, I want to, levitate or light things on fire with my hands, and like myself included, right? So it's like there's like that's which is like they warn about that, right? They're like, and they also give a caveat of like, hey, you can use herbs, you can use different things to kind of force yourself into those powers. but if you,
Yeah.
but the real big risk, because you didn't develop them through through meditation, through the ways that are recommended through the path of yoga. But there's it, right, it says, yeah, you can take these shortcuts, but like wash out basically, because you're basically, you won't have matured enough to actually use that power that you think you want. And so yeah, you're definitely, yeah, you got to be careful.
Well, the thing about, I mentioned the Bible and Jesus a couple of times. We're going to go a little deep now. The thing about the powers is that if you are using the powers, you're doing it wrong. Period. 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 That's it. Like, powers shit happens. And if that's what happens, that's what happens, right? Like, stuff can just spontaneously, like, there are times when I'm sitting with someone or whatever, and I'll say something out loud and they'll say to me, like, whoa, are you reading my mind? And honestly, like, no, not exactly, but I could feel the vibe, right? Like, whatever that vibe was, like, I was tuned into it and I said it out loud. Yeah. Sometimes if I'm sitting close to someone in the right state, like, their mind becomes a little readable. But am I ever thinking, like, let me peer into Alex's mind? No, 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 I don't know. If you're trying to have a power, or if you're trying to use a power, there be dragons, right? Like, that's craft. But if a thing just happens spontaneously, like, that's the will of God, right? And I'm very much into the Lord's Prayer, and I'm very much into thy will be done. And if God needs me to just, like in the Acts of the Apostles, if God needs me to go from the side of a river to like a town 7 miles away instantaneously, if he wants to teleport me there, okay, cool, I'll go. But I'm not going to be, because there's a story from the Buddhist tradition where this Chinese master was traveling with a couple of monks out of India, and they get to a river crossing, and they like focus their minds and whoop, whoop, over to the other side of the river, and he watches them do that, and he's like, if that's the way y'all rolling, I'm going the other way,
Hmm.
right? Because that's not the path that and sure, that's the path for those guys, but that's not the path that some people wanted. Some people want to take the spontaneous path where powers just happen on their own when providence so decrees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like a lot there. Yeah. It's like, okay, so like, because it's interesting. It's really interesting. Like, there- this this thing, I can't even mention it, but it's the cosmic entity of Rahu, which is, it's the north node of the moon technically, but in the Vedas it's
Right.
written in, it's this character, and it's basically, it's you have Rahu and Ketu, which are the north and south nodes of the moon, and basically, like, Rahu is like ultimate kind of control, and like like using your will to like set all the conditions. It's like it's the opposite of surrender. And then K2 is complete detachment. You're completely surrendered, right? And Rahu is really, it's like this kind of obsessive, like, kind of really, really kind of toxic, often if you're not careful, energy. But so like in my case, like, so the cities, right? Like, I have a desire. There's a desire that is there, and like that. It's just like, that sounds fun to like use my body and like cultivate this energy, and be able to perform these things. And so then there's a desire in it, so it's pushing me towards that. So I go through the process of cultivation, right? And even though I think I'm like moving towards a desire, I'm not. I think it needs a little bit more thought. There's a lot here with Rahu and all this, and this kind of operating with Rahu, and operating with kind of control and obsession, and kind of to make things happen. But it's outside of the scope of this conversation. But I'll just say,
I don't know that this conversation, I was just I would debate that point. We could make that the topic of the conversation.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I want you to talk to me a little bit more about cultivation. What is cultivation? What does that mean to you?
So I'm not an expert in this. I've practicing this kind of seriously only, maybe 2, 3 years. Um, but essentially my understanding is like, right. So you cultivate, you develop like developing the energetic efficiency of your body in all these different ways, and the flow of energy through all this stuff. And it builds this aura basically. That's what this torus field that runs through. And essentially, the bigger your aura, it's just the more capacity that you have to make change and manifest and create basically. And so it's like cultivating that. And it's like, and then it's a trust in myself. Like, I'm going to use this for the right reason. It's like staying true to like the purity of like, do I actually trust myself to develop this? Am I going to use this for my own pleasure and personal gain, or am I going to take a more selfless approach and like help humanity and all that? And so
Right.
that's what I would say. Yeah.
So, of the powers, which, if you had to pick one power
Hmm.
as like the best power, or one discipline is the best discipline, um, what do you do? What do you do, Alex?
I think I would. So I think it's already written basically in the stars of like what I'm after, and or what I'm destined to really like to go after in terms of my power. Yeah. And so, well, I think, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, like in the Yoga Sutras, there's the whole chapter, and it's like they list off, oh, well, here's what you can do. That you can become as strong as an elephant, and you can, turn into a little grain of sand. Like they list off all these cities, right? And they're kind of they're more. I think they're more kind of allegorical. They might
No,
also have. I think that it's.
no.
I think it's both. I think it's like a little bit of. It's like there's the physical aspect of it, and then there's also this kind of metaphysical thing that's also being attained. And so, yeah.
Which ones do you think are allegory?
I
Give me
mean,
an example.
well, okay, so let's take the elephant and the strength thing for example.
Yeah.
So it's like for sure, like you can use the city, and you can kind of become physically stronger, like for sure. And then
Yeah.
there's also strength as something. There's strength as the like the tarot card of strength. It's not just so it's like strength on every dimension, and fit in external physical is just one of those dimensions. There's like kind of emotional strength, and so I'm just saying it's like they're operating on multiple dimensions, I guess is all I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay.
But as far as which one, like what do I want to do? I think something that really appeals to me though is kind of the energy of like shape shifting, right? I kind of want to kind of to change, to kind of change, be adaptable, and to kind of change character, and to shape shift basically, or invisibility.
Oh,
One of those two. Those are kind of my two. Yeah.
what is it? Is it like an aversion to yourself? Is it a desire to just be something other, or what is it about? What is it about that appeals to you?
So it's a deepening of who I already am. So it's not an aversion to myself. It's like a realization of what I know that I can be, and that so like let's take shape
So, how
shifting.
does invisibility show us that?
Okay, invisibility. Yeah. I think, and so this would go to my astrology, right? Like a lot of the time, s- I feel that I am meant to be like the environment in which people exist. Like I am the air that people breathe. I am like and so there's a certain power that comes from being able to be invisible. And so it's and to kind of like when you go invisible, other people are able to kind of activate, and then you're able to be witness to that in kind of this way that you might not be able to if they could see you, if they could see you, like, and it's very esoteric to say it like that. It's like I'm cultivating right now, like kind of walking quietly. Like I like to walk around town a lot, and sometimes I'll just kind of like pass by people who are maybe looking at their phone, and like, and I've effectively I'm more invisible than I would be if I was generating a lot of noise, right? And so, but in terms of like full invisibility, that's something that I haven't attained yet. That's I don't know how that works. Do your clothes go invisible too, or do you have to?
Right, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I know someone who's that's a thing for them. That's their kick. But wait, if do your sutras tell you how to develop that city, or do they just tell you that it is a city?
It's a good question. I can probably just pull it up really quick. But they don't really, they, I guess they do kind of tell you how to do something, because it's like they tell you meditate on the strength of an elephant to have, like, meditate on an elephant. It's the Invisibility Sutra. Okay, yeah. Meditative on the relationship between form, light, and the eyes enables the yogi to become invisible. So there's the sutra. So form, light, and the eye. So interesting.
So what are you supposed to do with that? What is that? What does that mean in like terms of practice?
It doesn't.
What's the
really-
praxis here?
So that's where it's like I agree with you. Like the practice for yoga is going to always be the same. You're trying to develop, like, you're going up the ladder of the limbs, and so really, like, you're just trying to improve your focus. Really, like the practice for me right now, I'm still trying to improve my dhyana, like my meditation, my ability to just focus on an object of attention. Right.
How strong is that for you right now these days? Like what's your practice at?
I mean, it's definitely it's
Do you
hard.
go into like absorption states of
Mhm.
absorption?
I think there are it's momentarily. It's not something that I can really sustain in any real way. It's not something like
Do you get like a specific countersign that you'll like reliably like have before you go into a deeper state? It could be a sound, a feeling, a light, whatever. Do you have a thing that happens for you?
it's definitely, it's like a feeling. I would say it's a feeling.
So let me ask you this: when how do you sit every day? Like, do you have a schedule, or what's your practice look like?
Yeah, ideally like a morning practice. Like you know.
Okay, so 7 days out of the week, how many days out of that 7 are you having that feeling?
Mm. Oh, like, not, I mean, maybe 0 in a week. It doesn't, or maybe 1 or 2. Yeah, something like that. But it's
Okay.
very variable. And also I'll say it's a lot easier to attain that state outside of my morning practice. Say in
Yeah.
like, to go into like states of trance and this kind of thing. It's easier to get to that in, say, a yoga class or in music or but the morning practice, it's like that's where it's the most like kind of sustained. It's like if you can activate it in the morning practice, then it's like you have control over it, right? You can summon it kind of in a controlled way, where it's like if you can only get it to happen in a yoga class, then it's not as sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say, as someone who's not a professional haver of wisdom or knower of things, given what I've read, I wouldn't really worry about anything as far as what happens when it happens. What you want to let your practice lead you towards is getting to the point where that 1 out of 7 turns into 2 out of 7, turns into 3 out of 7, turns into 4 out of 7, turns into 5 out of 7. And then once you're at 7 out of 7 and you kind of like, hold that space, then you can really like, all right, now let's play with what's coming up,
Yeah.
But really just like, because the thing is it's the thing about those states, and I'm sure you've noticed, is like if they get too tasty and you start getting grabby, then they go away, right?
Mhm.
And so because the thing that you're training yourself to do by turning that once a week into twice a week into three times, that that is the same skill that you're developing there. It's going to translate into being able to exist in that space without always like playing catch with the rabbit.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And that's why I said, it's like, you asked me, like, so what are you doing to activate the cities? It's like, yeah, it's like, it's just the basic practice, right? That's what I'm at the basics, right? But the thing with the cities, and it kind of comes back to like Rahu and all that, but it's like, I want to have this illusory carrot on a stick to even have me sit and practice, right? And it's like, I mean, and it's not just the cities,
So,
right? It's like interpersonal relationships, and it's like, these are,
right.
it's always a desire for what I'm practicing, which is, yeah, like problematic and all that, but that's where it's like, there's you have this Rahu Ketu, you got to detach, it's like, there's a detachment that's there as well. So yeah, that's
Um, there's dispassion in the
mm,
Philokalia. In the glossary of the Philokalia, there is the definition of the word dispassion. And in Greek, it's apatheia, which is the word that our word apathy comes from, but they mean very different things. And so, um, in the terms of like the whole Philokalia thing, right? These Orthodox monks are writing a lot about Christ, and a lot of what they're writing about Christ and what makes Christ so powerful is his dispassion. It's his ability to feel every pain you've ever felt and take it and not flinch, right? Like, because he knows it's not his, he's not taking it personally. And like being able to develop that quality within yourself, right? Because what does he teach? He teaches you how to follow him. Like, he is trying to be an example, and he wants you to practice what he practices. And so when I ask you about cities and like which power is the most powerful power, which power is the best power, I did that because I have an answer to that question. And for me, boundless compassion that's the power, right? Like, it can be the practice and it can be the power, and it's everything. You can be everywhere, you can be nowhere, you can be invisible, you can be yourself, you can be whatever you want to be. But if that feeling of well-being is just radiant and intentionally so, then, like, that's the great thing about my model of the cities is you can literally have any power you want because they're not your powers. They're just happening when they need to, right? Like, you don't have to learn how to, like, so I know from my reading of the Vishuddhimagga that if I stared at water long enough and repeated the word water in my mind, eventually I could get to the point where I could control the element of water. And that could be fun, but why do all the work when I can just be happy and loving? And also, disclaimer, I'm not doing that most of the time. I'm caught up in my own bullshit here. I'm not a professional haver of wisdom. I am an inner. Um, but the ideal would be to be in that state of just total, like, open love, right? Because that, you take out your copy of Be Here Now, and what was Jesus when he was getting nailed to the cross? He was love, right? And the Buddha says it in the suttas. He says that if if even if they're taking you, if they've got you pinned down and they're cutting your arm off inch by inch, if you feel hatred or anger in your heart towards them as a reaction, I'm sorry, but you're not actually my disciple. You haven't qualified yet. You're not there.
yes.
So, yeah, that's the superpower.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I
Love,
agree.
loving kindness,
Yeah.
meta, compassion, just all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey man, I agree, and I think that's a good place to start closing up here. My computer's about to run out of batteries, and it's gonna be
Okay. All right.
complicated. But
I hope I wasn't too soapboxy.
I don't think no. I think that was great, man. That was cool. Yeah, I appreciate it. That was
Well, I appreciate the patient. I don't know if we got to any of the shit you wanted to talk about, but
pretty much.
I remember you asking me about community, and we never talked about community. We didn't talk about like the actual word community and like what, you know, like unpacking that. So, and I want to say it now because I was thinking about it before I got your message. So community, I looked it up, and the other part points towards service. It actually points towards if you're, you know, working in the same kitchen or you're working in the same military unit or whatever, right? Like your community are the people that you are serving your purpose with in your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. And because you mentioned community in the DM, I wanted to at least say those words out loud.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's a great, so wait, so say the etymology again. So where does purpose come in? It's like, or the,
Well, it's the purpose part is that's me editorializing. Calm is with the unity part goes to another root, but it points towards just to serve. So it is those that you are serving with. And so if you're serving some kind of a purpose, whatever that purpose may be. Yeah.
for sure. Well, Luke, you know, hey, I'm honored to have you in my community, and I'm thankful for the opportunities that you've given me to serve my purpose through the piano lessons, through recording this podcast. So I appreciate it very much. Yeah.
Love,
Yeah.
Alexander. Love. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for inviting me to just ramble for a while.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Be well.
Be well.